Before you listen, let me ask you something. Have you ever wondered why you keep struggling with the same patterns, even though you try so hard to be okay? Why your body gets sick? Why anxiety shows up? Why you keep pushing yourself past exhaustion? What if none of that was random? What if your body has been carrying a story your childhood never had permission to tell? Dr. Gabor Maté spent decades as a physician working with addiction, illness, and mental health. What he discovered wasn't about weakness or broken people. It was about adaptation, about how children learn to survive emotionally, and how those survival patterns quietly follow us into adulthood. As you listen, don't judge yourself. Just notice what resonates.
Can reduce it to or simplify it to is that virtually everything I ever saw, whether it was cancer, whether it was multiple sclerosis, whether it was depression, whether it was addiction, whether it was ADHD, whether it was colitis, rheumatoid arthritis, you know what it came down to? It came down to what happens in people's childhoods. In other words, the major contributor, I don't say the only, but the major contributing factor to the onset of illness, whether it's mental illness, physical illness, whether it's addiction, whether it's behavior problems, what happens to people in the first few years of life. Now, as I said, everything I've seen, whether it was cancer, multiple sclerosis, or mental illness or addiction, begins with childhood issues. Well, how can cancer begin with childhood issues, you ask yourself? A Canadian study showed that when children are abused, when they grow up to be adults, the risk of cancer goes up nearly 50%. Why? Because the abuse or the trauma creates coping mechanisms. Now, one of the ways that we cope when children are traumatized, one of the ways they cope with it is to soothe themselves, and then that's where addictions come in. But another way to cope would be is if you get the message that you're not good enough, that you are not worthy enough, then you might spend the rest of your life trying to prove that you are. And how do you do that? By being very nice to everybody, by never saying how you feel, because they might not like how you feel, by never expressing healthy anger when somebody's crossing your boundaries, by working too hard to prove that you're worthwhile. That's why I was a workaholic doctor, because I got the message as an infant, as a Jewish infant under the Nazis in the Second World War. I got the message that the world didn't want me, I wasn't good enough. Well, then you spend the rest of your life compensating by taking on too much, and you're stressing yourself. And those stresses have an impact on your physiology. They have an impact on your immune system. They have an impact on your cardiovascular system, on your heart, on your nervous system. They can cause disease. So most diseases that most of my colleagues, the physicians, think they're just random, arbitrary diseases, they're not random or arbitrary at all. They're the result of life-strong stresses that result from a child's attempt to compensate. So typically, people with autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis or multiple sclerosis, cancer, if you look at their lives, what you notice about them is they've had great difficulty expressing their emotions because in childhood they were forbidden from doing so. So they compensated by suppressing their feelings, and they have great difficulty saying no, so that when people ask them to do things, they automatically say yes, and they'll keep doing things even though they're very stressed by it. And then you end up with the body saying no, because they didn't, in the form of illness. I know.
If this feels uncomfortably familiar, being the nice one, the strong one, the one who never asks for help, please understand, this wasn't your personality. It was your nervous system trying to keep you safe. This is something many people never hear. Your symptoms weren't betraying you. They were protecting you. When you learned too early that saying no wasn't safe, The body often speaks when the child inside was silenced.
But what I can tell you, that is absolutely scientifically unquestionable, is that you cannot separate the mind from the body. So whatever happens emotionally will actually have an impact on your physiology. Because the brain systems that regulate emotions are part and parcel of the same system that the immune system is a part of, the cardiovascular system is a part of, the nervous system is a part of, and the hormonal apparatus is all part of it as well. So whatever happens emotionally also immediately has an impact physiologically. And that's why you can't separate people's emotional lives from their physiology. You can also not separate people's physiology from their relationships. We know, for example, that children whose parents are stressed are much more likely to have asthma. And so that the more stressed and depressed the parents are, the more medication a child might need for their asthma. And why? Because the child's emotions have an impact on the child's physiology, and a parent's emotional states have an impact on the child's emotions. And if you want to look at it more broadly, what are we talking about? If you're looking at the increasing rate of asthma in North America these days, and allergies of all kinds, or the increasing rate of ADHD and depression and all that amongst kids, what's going on? What's going on is that the parents are getting more stressed, and therefore the kids are getting more stressed, and therefore the kids are getting more sick. And it's not a question of the parents not loving their kids, it's not a question of blaming parents, it's not a question of parents not doing their best. It's the question is that because of economic circumstances and greater isolation, the breakdown of extended families, the breakdown of communities, all the uncertainties of modern industrial life, the parents are more stressed, and the more stressed the parents are, the more stressed the kids are. And when the kids are emotionally stressed, that also affects their physiology. Isolation. At the end of life, a number of studies have shown now that when people are emotionally isolated, they're more likely to get sick, and if they get sick, they're more likely to die. And so, for example, amongst elderly couples, when one of them is hospitalized, the other's risk for dying goes up significantly. Why? Because our physiology cannot be separated from our emotions, and our emotions cannot be separated from our relationships. So human relationships are actually necessary to maintain healthy human life. We're social creatures. It also means that in a society where kids are growing up increasingly without their parents, because their parents are too busy working, they have to, and where children are more and more without that support of the clan and the extended family and the community, you're going to get more people growing up in isolation. And then we try and compensate for that with our cell phones and our internet, which doesn't really do it for us, because for real intimacy, for real contact, you need human connections, not mechanical connections. And so what we're seeing is a whole set of dynamics that leave children more hurt and more isolated. As a result, there are many more problems that they try and compensate for through all kinds of behaviors. And the behaviors that lead to physical illness, like trying to be super nice and trying to always to suppress yourself and taking on too much stress, or the behaviors that try to compensate by soothing yourself through addictions, they all come down to what happened earlier in life.
Human beings don't heal in isolation, and many inner children learned to survive alone, emotionally invisible. If you feel empty, disconnected, or chronically lonely, that doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It means something important was missing.
And I'm just writing an article right now for the Toronto Star on the recent election. let me finish with just one final comment. I don't care what you think about Stephen Harper's policies. This is not a political talk. But one thing I can tell you is that so many people felt uncomfortable with him on the emotional level. Why did they feel uncomfortable with him? Because they looked into his eyes, and what did they see? They saw nothing. And people talked about his dead eyes. Now, you know what that tells me? That he was a traumatized person. Because a child's eyes go dead when what they're seeing is too painful. And emotionally, the brain protects the child by shutting down emotionally. And then, when you're hurt emotionally, then one of the ways you compensate is you want to be controlling, and you want to be angry, and you want to be powerful, and you want to close your eyes to human suffering and to human vulnerability, and your eyes go dead. And that's not a deliberate decision. So here's what I'm saying to you. Whether you're looking at politics or health or human behavior, whether you're looking at education, whether you're looking at relationships, because how we programmed as children shows up in our adult relationships. The problem arose because early in childhood, you were somehow hurt. Because when people are traumatized, a number of things happen. One is they begin to feel themselves as deficient, because children are narcissistic. And I don't mean that in the sense of any pejorative implication. What I mean by that is they think it's all about them. They think everything's about themselves. So when good things happen to a child, the child will assume, hey, I must be great because look at all these great things that are happening. But if bad things happen to a child, if the child is yelled at, or beaten, or sexually abused, or told to go to their room when their parents don't like their behavior, or the parents are just depressed or unhappy or stressed, traumatized in their own life, the child thinks these bad things are happening because I'm a bad person. So then you have low self-esteem. That's the first thing that happens. The second thing that happens is that what we now know, and this is a conference on the brain, what we now know is that the circuits of the brain are actually shaped by early experiences, so that the brain isn't just genetically determined, that already in the uterus, what's happening to the mother is already affecting the brain circuitry of the child. So when the mother is stressed, that's affecting the baby's brain. And these people that are traumatized in childhood, they don't have the conditions for healthy brain development. And then they're going to have mental health problems. And they're going to have ways of compensating for those mental health problems through addictive behaviors. So whether we're looking at the low self-esteem, whether we're looking at the brain physiology, whether we're looking at the spiritual isolation of how alone the addict feels, that it all goes back to what happened early in childhood. It's just a compensation. It's not a healthy compensation. It creates more problems. But where did it begin? It began with suffering of the young child. So, all this stuff can be worked out, but if I can just summarize everything I've tried to tell you, the first few years are so important. And so if you have children, make those 3 or 4 or 5 early years the most important years of your life, to devote them to your children. And if you as an adult are suffering from depression, anxiety, addiction, illness, or whatever, go back to your childhood and find out how you were hurt and heal that hurt, and then you can heal yourself. Thank you.
If this touched something inside you, pause for a moment. Not to analyze, but to feel. Because healing doesn't begin with fixing yourself. It begins with understanding why you had to become who you became. The patterns you carry were once protection. The anxiety, the people-pleasing, the exhaustion, even the illness. None of it means you're broken. It means a child adapted to survive. And that child still deserves compassion. If you feel ready, you can gently reflect. What did I need as a child that I never received? This is the work we explore here. You're not late. You're not weak. You're becoming aware. Healing takes time, and you don't have to do it alone. If this message resonated with you, know that your journey matters. Be gentle with yourself. Keep exploring and surround yourself with support. If you haven't yet, subscribe and join this community. We're in this together. And before you go, comment, "I am healing to affirm your growth. You are seen, you are valued, and you are not alone."